Today we're talking about the Bengalis, and if we're lucky, we might even see a Bengal tiger on stream today. Food is arguably the most important resource in Age of Empires 2, but all we see in game is just a single set of numbers. Throughout this series, we will be diving in to see exactly what foods each civilization prepared and ate, and how well I can recreate them. This is Meals of Empires. What I have in my hand is a bottle gourd. I went to my Indian grocer in the bottom of the fridge and I couldn't even figure out what this was. I had to go ask the cashier, and he originally thought it was a type of eggplant. And he actually called up, I think, one of his coworkers, and he was like, "What is that that's in the fridge?" So today's Bengali cuisine focuses on a lot of ingredients that are found in the area that Bengalis and all of the Bengali empires were historically coming up from. That is the lower Ganges River Basin into the Sundarban Delta. Most of the ingredients in today's cooking would have already been present in India in the antiquity before the medieval period even started. But there are a few ingredients that might have come slightly later in the medieval period that I'll point out as well. Today's foods are going to be a mixed vegetable and mixed lentil curry or mixed dal curry, as well as some mustardy radishes and some steamed rice. Let's get started with the cooking. So let me start off by explaining all of the different interesting ingredients we have for today. On the right here, we have some brown, or also called black, chickpeas. And you can see they've gotten like a little bit of a red color now that they're in the water cooking away. They have been soaked for most of the day as well to help allow the water to infiltrate the seed coat. Along with the chickpeas, we have our mung dal, or mung beans. These are unsplit. These are the variety that we used for the Malay when we use mung bean sprouts. And these have been soaking as well for about a day. And then I wrapped them in this wet cloth or wet towel, hoping that they would sprout up a little bit, but it does take a little bit more time for those sprouts to come out of the mung beans. Lotus are amphibious plants. They grow on the top of water like a lily pad, but this is the rhizome, and this is what connects the original plant to new plants as it spreads out. So it can spread out with these rhizomes, similar to what a strawberry can do. Then we have our okra. I wasn't able to find any fresh okra this time of year, so we're going to be using frozen okra. I've never bought anything that's been wrapped in the cellophane before, but I guess this is protective for this radish. There's a wide variety of radish species found in southern Asia, and so this is actually going to be something that we're going to cook up very quickly along with a mustard sauce. We're going to start our curry without using any onion or garlic. I wasn't sure about this decision. I was like, can I really do this? No onion or garlic? But I think it kind of fits. And we're not even using an oil we've used previously on the series. We are starting with mustard oil. Now, a lot of mustard oil being sold in the United States or in the EU will say somewhere on there that it's only for external use. And I've looked at this bottle and I haven't seen that. I just see this for export only. And the reason for that is because of something called uricic acid. So the uricic acid is been shown in some animal studies, not in humans, but I think in mice, to cause fatty buildup in the heart. And this is the reason why canola oil was invented, because it's a genetically modified version of the rapeseed, which is similar mustard, to not have or not produce this uricic oil in such high amounts. But mustard oil has still been used historically throughout India. Use it in moderation the same way you're going to be using most oils. And this actually has quite a strong flavor. So it's only going to be used in very specific dishes unless you cook Bengali food all the time. In that case, maybe take it easy. Let's start by opening up this bottle gourd. Bottle gourds are in the cucumber family, Cucurbitaceae. Looks fairly similar to a cucumber, maybe slightly bitter, but nowhere near as bitter as the bitter melon that we used in the salad for the Malay. There's a slight sliminess that you can kind of find on pumpkins or other squash species, and this is present here as well. I'm just going to remove some of the blemishes that are on the outer skin and just make sure to give it a nice wash. I will say that bottle gourd has the potential to be toxic if it's not properly stored. You would have a strong bitter taste if that was the case. So as long as it tastes edible, you're in good hands. So I'm going to quickly clean up the lotus root or rhizome. Sometimes it's called a root. It's a little bit easier to say, I guess, than rhizome, but not necessarily correct. This is just the outer part of the rhizome that I can just scrape off with my fingernail. So you can just use a spoon or anything really blunt. You don't need to use something sharp to take off this outer layer, but it can be good to take it off just in case there's any mud or muck or anything else that's stuck on here. You can kind of hear how thick the cell walls are. That's what's giving that really strong crunching sound. And there is that inner pattern. It's semi-hollow. The evolutionary benefit of having these open hollow areas are for gas exchange because this is completely submerged. So most of the gas exchange is occurring at the leaf that's above the water, like a lily pad would float above the water. But I think some of it could occur underwater as well, the same way that fish are able to have gas exchange through their gills underwater. And all parts of the lotus plant are eaten. New shoots that are coming up above the water, the seeds are eaten and crushed up into a paste or a flour. The leaves can also be bundled around to form a package to steam rice, similar to how we use the banana leaves to make the num ansum for our episode for the Khmer. And I already can smell the aroma of the rhizome. It's not just like a starchy root vegetable, it's more on the savory end, and maybe a little bit umami. Maybe a mushroom would actually be the closest in general flavor. One big difference with the flavors of Eastern India with the Bengalis is we have less tamarind in the cooking and more mango as a souring agent. Because the Bengalis are in a more tropical environment than a lot of the civilizations we've done in this series, I would say seasonality of foods matters less, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this in the winter, when a lot of the other civilizations are a bit more hampered with what foods are available. The decision of when to eat what food is actually based off of how the climate affects you as a human. So you might eat more sour foods in the summer because those are seen as more cooling foods. And then during the cooler months, during the winter, you might eat more soups, and you might be more willing to cook foods for a more extensive period of time. You don't mind all the extra heat from cooking. Rice has always been a main staple of the Bengalis, but in the modern day, it's grown all year round. But in the past, it would mainly just be revolving around the monsoonal season, which comes in late fall, early winter. There was a few different Bengali empires during the medieval time period. Medieval isn't a great explanation of the time periods in India because it's better used as a reference for the time periods in Europe, where you had the fall of Rome and then the progression of learning and technology kind of came to a standstill. Starting off early medieval period, you had the Gupta Empire from 240 to 579, which controlled most of northern India. They're also seen as like the equivalent to the Roman Empire, but in India. And there was the Pax Gupta, similar to the Pax Romana. But following that, you had the Kingdom of Gauda, which kind of built out of it. It was almost like the equivalent of the Byzantine Empire, because it's just found in the eastern part of what was the larger empire from before. And then from that is the empire that's mostly seen in Age of Empires 2 in the campaigns, which is the Pala Empire, which originally followed Mahayana Buddhism, which is technically vegetarian, or a lot of the texts favor vegetarian diets. And the Bengalis are of note because they were the last Indian state who did follow Buddhism before it being converted to Hinduism with the Sena dynasty in 1070 to 1230. The great thing about lotus roots is because they have those thick cell walls, they stay fairly crunchy after they've been cooked. It sounds like I'm breaking up something woody. Panchphoron is a whole spice mix, so you're using the whole seeds before they're ground down and just adding them into oil. And the seeds that are typically used are fenugreek, cumin, and fennel seeds, as well as some less popular seeds, including nigella seeds, which are also called kalonji or black cumin, and have a slight onion flavor. So they're often used to replace that onion flavor that's not used. And the other seed commonly used are called wild celery seeds in English because there's not a good translation. They're not actually in the same genus as celery, but they're said to have a similar flavor. So I have neither of those second ones, but at least this spice mix can influence the general spices that we're going to be putting into this dish. So we're going to start with some cumin and turmeric. We're going to continue in this series of using green peppercorn as a replacement of red chili peppers that's used in modern Indian or at least Southeast Asian cooking. You can already smell those spices mixing with the mustard flavors in the pot, and it smells so good. I hope it's not coming across in the audio that my mouth is just watering. We're just going to let all of these spices bloom in the oil for a moment. And similar to the Dravidians, the Bengalis are located at an area where you have the confluence of cow's milk and coconut milk. Being so close to so many different water bodies, there was a lot of fish that was readily available. One thing you have to be careful about when you're cutting up these lotus roots is the knife seems to want to deviate, so just be careful where you keep your fingers. So there are all our lotus roots. Will give a nice umami flavor to start off our dish. And next will be our bottle gourd, the elephant apple, Delinia indica. It's a sour fruit that looks like 2 or 3 apples combined, almost actually more like a green mango. And it's used similar to the quince fruit that we used for the Portuguese. But the reason we don't have it here is because it's an essential food for elephants. I'll add a little bit of water, turn this up a tad, and we'll add in our little lotus rings that'll be used as garnish as well. And add some salt at this point as well before we forget. While those first ingredients start cooking, we can do our first trivia question. Which ingredient in today's cooking beat Columbus to the New World by about 10,000 years? Somehow getting across, maybe getting stuck to a bird or something. The species that beat Columbus to the Americas was the bottle gourd that we just cut up, or as my Indian grocer was calling it, lauki. So for reference, humans crossed the land bridge from Asia to the Americas probably around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. Before, people thought it was like closer to 12,000, but then they found even older civilizations already in the Americas. And there's evidence that the bottle gourd was also present in the Americas 10,000 years ago, despite it clearly coming from Asia, or I guess from Africa, where humans first, diverged from. Bottle gourd is not something that can survive the journey in the cold across a land bridge going past Alaska. If allowed to completely ripen and then dry out, will have all of its skin completely intact, and the inside will slowly break down until you just can hear the seeds rattling inside this empty fruit. And the thought is, this gourd, which is often in the shape of a bottle, could have just floated across the ocean along with currents from Africa to South America. And then from there, it could have been spread by other megafauna. So maybe not the African elephant, but now in the Americas, you would have the ground sloth or the glyptodons, which are these large like armadillo species that were present at the end of the Pleistocene. I think I'm not an archaeologist by any means, but I think Pleistocene is the last age. And here's the Bengal tiger I promised you. Most of the flavors that I'm smelling right now are coming from our lotus rhizome, not as much from the bottle gourd or aka calabash. I mentioned when I was using the fresh okra when we were doing the Persians that okra can be slimy, but in this case, when the okra have been opened up like this, they've been frozen and allowed to thaw back out. They are very slimy. I don't think it's going to be an issue in our final dish, and I don't think I'm going to be using all the okra. I don't think it would have been the main vegetable that would have been around during the time period, but I do think it has an interesting flavor. It also has an interesting crunch, so we're getting the full gamut of crunches today, from the lotus rhizome on the high end to the cucumber on the low end, and I think actually the low end will be the bananas that we're going to be adding in a bit. The okra does also have some similarity with the shape of the lotus, having these different sections. Obviously, these have seeds, and these are actually fruit and not a rhizome. The okra are from Africa, and we'll come back to them when we do the Ethiopians. But I believe they would have arrived to Eastern India at some point in the medieval period, if not the late medieval period, when you had the Mughal Empire expanding into that area from Uzbekistan. Bananas grow on the tree like this. So here is the stalk, and this is where, I guess this is the ovary, this is where the end of the flower is. So you'll see a lot of animals open the banana like this. I prefer just using the stalk, but Abby does it the opposite way. And if you really want to get into it in terms of botany, which I don't know if I've done on stream before, you can see that the banana has 3 carpels. It has 3 chambers to the ovary. So this is a self-fertile banana, which is why it has no seeds. A lot of bananas that are still present in Bangladesh still have seeds. There's quite a few different varieties, but they can be quite difficult to find in Europe. So we're just going to stick with the basic Cavendish banana that we have here. Along with the banana, I'm going to add some coconut. After we saw my struggles with fresh coconut with Dravidians, I'm just using grated coconut for here. But it should still add quite a bit of flavor to our curry. And we'll finish this off by adding in our brown chickpeas. I'm going to add all the water with this because it'll help everything cook together. And I'll add my mung beans. This is half a cup of chickpeas and half a cup of the mung beans. I'm definitely smelling the coconut now, along with the banana, so we've added a bit more sweetness into the savoriness we started with. Second trivia question. Yes or no, is a banana plant a tree? Have you heard someone say a banana tree before? By botanical standards, a tree is defined as something that has wood, which a banana is lacking, has a central stem, which a banana kind of does, and is perennial or lasts around for multiple generations. And that last one is a little bit tricky. Let me get into the details. Obviously, evolution doesn't have to play by the rules of whether something is strictly in a category of tree or not a tree. So if you continue to say banana tree, I'm not going to come after you, as I'm not the banana police. While banana plants can get up to 2 humans tall and look like they have a central stem, they do not produce any wood. And the central stem dies back after flowering. So that central stem doesn't last around for multiple years or multiple seasons like a typical tree does. The central section is called a pseudostem, and it's held together by all the tightly packed stems of each of the large leaves. So you have all of these leaves that are growing and branching off onto either sides. And then once the banana plant has built up enough energy, which it stores in a corm, which is that underground root structure, the same thing as what an onion is. Once it has enough energy, it shoots out a true stem, which at the end of it is an inflorescence. So that's where you have a big group of flowers, and that inflorescence goes up above all the leaves and then kind of hangs back down because it's so heavy. We're going to pretend these are flowers for a moment at the base of the inflorescence. The inflorescence is a group of flowers, and they're all covered in this cone-shaped purplish or reddish cover, which are all made up of bracts. Bracts are just modified leaves that are found around flowers or inflorescences. The first part that opens is all of the female flowers. So one of these bracts will open up and expose all the female flowers. And so you can have your pollinators, such as bats or sunbirds, come in with the pollen. They're just looking for all the rich nectar that you might have near the female flowers. They'll come in, they'll pollinate, and we'll have bananas developing, and they'll shoot up straight like this. Each banana is called a finger, and so together this would be called a hand, and they'll shoot up towards the sky, and somehow they can just stay rigid like this, though now you see when they're fully ripe, they don't really stay rigid, upright like that. And then after these start developing, this is the ovary of the plant that starts developing into a fruit. Then the bracts that are lower down into this inflorescence will open up and expose the male flowers, which is where all the pollen comes from. Once this finishes flowering, the pseudostem and all of the leaves will die back completely, but you will still have offshoots off of that corm that's underneath. And so you'll have what was the mother plant and then all these little baby plants that come off the sides. So you could say it's perennial in that respect because it still does come back without having to go through the whole growing from a seed again. But those successive offspring, so to speak, aren't as strong as the original mother plant. Radishes are from Southeast Asia, but they diverged throughout Eurasia and Africa very early on in human history. And so you can go from the large white daikon radishes that are very common in East Asia, in China and Korea and Japan, to the small little red radishes that you find more commonly in Europe. So this is somewhere in between. This is a green radish that I would say is more typical in the modern sense for northern China, A lot of the varieties that I think are common in modern India are more of the white variety that look a little bit more like a daikon radish, but this is closer to the size, and I think this will be closer to the taste of what's found. So I've peeled the radish a little bit, and now I'm just going to slice it up into thin slices. I want there to be a nice wide surface for all that mustardy flavor to cover up the ingredients. This is sweeter than most radishes. This is pretty interesting. And we're going to be using some of those same spices. Green peppercorn, let me grind up some more. Something I think I forgot to mention when I was talking about the mustard oil earlier is how exactly it gets pressed. I'm going to link a video of modern mustard oil production that uses a camel as a way of powering the mill, which I find very, very interesting. And I'm going to grind up some mustard seeds. Not really necessary when we already have mustard oil, but it might add some little tiny bursts and blast of mustardy flavor, little pockets of flavor as we're eating our radishes. Could be fun. So there we go. We have our cumin, our turmeric, our mustard seeds all ground up, and our green peppercorn all ground up. So these I'm going to leave as half moons. I think it might be fun to have the difference between the quarter moons and the half moons. Last item I'll slip in is a bay leaf. Alrighty, we'll cover that up. I think I haven't put in jaggery yet, which is our sweetener. We haven't put our amchur yet, which will be to adjust the sourness. And it's really what it is, for those who aren't familiar, it's just less refined cane sugar, so it still has some of the minerals that are present. Some jaggery can be rock hard, so you just have to take that into consideration. This stuff is pretty good. It's not super molassesy, so I'm going to try to start with 1 tablespoon of jaggery, mix that in along with the salt, and see how the flavors adapt. Just a hint of sweetness, but not necessarily thinking dessert level of sweetness. Yeah, that looks all good. Let's move on to our rice. The rice we are using is brown Sona Musuri rice. Sona Musuri rice is more typical of southern India than the Bangladesh Bengali area. The reason why I'm using this is because I couldn't find a lot of the common Bengali rice varieties, and I'm using brown rice for the first time in this series. I probably should have been using it more in the other episodes we've done so far. The difference is brown rice still has the bran and the germ part of the rice grain on it, so it hasn't been polished to remove those parts, and that would have been more typical of the medieval period when you don't have all that extra time or the machines necessary to polish the rice, polish those parts off, and would be a little bit healthier. The downside is it's not as fluffy or light as your modern white rice is. So there is my 1 cup or 250 milliliters of my brown rice, and to that we'll add 2 cups or 500 milliliters of water. So the last item to add here is our amchur, or our dried green mango powder, and that'll add a little bit of sourness to our dish. So I will introduce you to the different meals we have here. Starting off, we have our mixed vegetable curry. There's almost too many vegetables in here to mention, but I'll do my best. Right on top, we have our lotus root. You've had these once before, I believe. We also have our bottle gourd, which you saw earlier, our banana, coconut shreds, okra, and then our 2 legumes going along with it. We see our brown chickpeas, a bit darker than the typical chickpea variety we're mostly used to, and some mung beans that have slightly sprouted, but I only soaked them for a day, so they didn't completely sprout. And then here we have our mustardy radish. Not 100% sure this is going to be along the lines of what you like to eat, but you can give it a try if you're feeling brave. And then along with that, we have our rice. This is a rice that's more commonly found in southern India, but it's a brown rice despite it looking very white here. So I'll let you start wherever you would like.
Parts of it that I really like, and there's parts of it that I really hate.
Okay. It's a really mixed bag.
It's like a musty
scent or taste. I wonder if that's cooking it with the mustard oil.
I'm not saying mustard.
No, I know. I know it sounds similar.
Like,
but the mustard oil does have like a weird tang or...
it's not tang that I'm tasting or feeling.
Musty.
It's good though.
Yeah.
It's good. I appreciate it. Like, there are a bunch of different textures here. Okay, I can't figure it out.
Okay. Do you want to try the radish? And the radish itself isn't super spicy.
It smells like farts.
Okay. What smells like?
Oh, that's not bad.
The radish itself is kind of sweet, and then the mustard flavor I was thinking just kind of comes in at the end.
Yeah, this is good, actually.
And I was thinking the radish you could kind of just eat on its own.
It's a little spicy.
Yeah, I
Okay.
maybe put a little bit too much
It's
green
spicy,
peppercorn.
but surprisingly good.
Mhm.
If you roasted these up to like a crisp, be a nice little
Like a chip.
potato chip.
Okay, I like that. Execution score.
8.75.
Okay. For a second, I was afraid you were just going to stop at pretty good, and that was going to be our new scale of bad, pretty bad, good, pretty good.
You mean like last time when I just
Said
switched to
A+, yes.
and B+. I mean, the vegetables don't seem to be over undercooked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that these are kind of varying in thickness.
Yeah.
Like, keep it consistent.
Yeah. And should you serve this to your girlfriend?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'd probably eat it.
Might as well.
8.
8. Okay. Solid. So the lotus root still has some of its flavor, but I would say the banana and the coconut are more of those floral flavors, those like the high notes of this culinary dish that you hear come in first or your mouth tastes first, and they kind of just settle in. Not a nutty flavor, but sometimes nuts have like this texture that's a little powdery or a little mealy, and that's kind of what I'm getting as the lasting notes once those bananas and those coconut flavors go away. And I think that's just from having the chickpeas in here. The chickpeas do taste different, but it's hard for me to exactly pinpoint how different it is from the typical chickpeas. It's a slightly nuttier flavor, and it still has a bit of its crunch too, though it's well cooked inside. So it definitely feels like it's cooking different than your typical chickpea or the chickpeas I'm familiar with. I almost want to try to make these again and make it into a lotus sandwich. So just fry up these lotus roots on their own, and just like this full size lotus root, and then put a slice of radish in between there, and you could just layer them up into sort of like a crispy little sandwich. Even if it's like not your favorite dish in the world, you at least get that sense of satisfaction that this is healthy for me. So that's it for the Bengalis. Until next time, I'll see you in the comments.